on Friday, there was a pact that was formed, or a coming together, a memorandum of understanding. Something happened, and it seems as though because of that something happening, things have changed significantly in the country. Were you aware that an MOU has brought about this change that Kenya is seeking?
Thank you once again, Du, City, and Aseto. Pleasure and a privilege to be here once again. Just shooting straight like an arrow. I think what we are talking about is an indication of our total lack of sense of direction on the part of the leadership at the very top. I do not, in total sincerity, understand what this pact, this so-called memorandum, is about. Kenya is not the DRC, nor are we Sudan, where we are at war. I cannot understand this exuberant energy that is occupying and driving the political space. I have elsewhere spoken of the spirit of the lake, and I think there's also the spirit of the valley, which seem to be possessing the political space, restless spirits. And if you get a bit into African cosmology, you will understand a bit about the spirit of the lake. Cities here who understands about the Nyawawa. And certainly if you go to the Rift Valley among the Nandi people, they also speak of a spirit that possessed the Orkoyot, Koitalel, Arab Samoei. Those are things that we can get into, and it would appear that these two spirits have converged, and they are dancing a strange jungle dance that we need to exercise as Kenyans. As I've said, this country is not at war. I see the president gallivanting across the nation. He's now come to Nairobi, and he's talking about uniting the country. To the best of my knowledge, Kenyans are united. Kenyans are citizens. I'm not aware of the tribal war, barring a few skirmishes which we saw a few days ago in the Transmara Kisii border region, and those kinds of skirmishes have been with us since before independence, and they are usually sparked by certain absences and certain blemishes of resources, and which have always been addressed. I do not know of a national catastrophe that would cause us to get excited about President William Ruto and Mr. Raila Odinga converging to say that they now have got a memorandum of agreement. And when you look at that memorandum of agreement, it's not saying anything new. Virtually everything that is there has been addressed comprehensively and covered in instruments that govern this country. The Constitution of Kenya 2010, and in various statutory laws, where they talk about inclusivity, you talk about corruption, you talk about food, you talk about democracy. They are all there. And as I draw towards the conclusion of these preliminary reflections, it's irony of momentous proportions that President William Ruto and Mr. Odinga are talking about expansion of the democratic space at a time when they have taken Parliament, which is the highest symbol of democracy in this country. They've taken it hostage. You listen to the leader of the majority speaking in the House, and you listen to the so-called leader of minority speaking in the House, and you wonder what kind of theater of the absurd this Parliament has been reduced into. They speak for the executive. They've become echo chambers for the national executive. We have seen the purge in parliament, in the parliamentary committees. Those who attempt to be independent-minded must be punished. We have seen that the war against corruption is being overturned in Parliament. They receive reports from the Auditor General, from the Controller of Budget, and instead of interrogating those reports, they turn to parodying and berating and battering the people who occupy those offices and who present those reports. So I do not understand what President William Ruto and Mr. Odinga are about. And President Ruto has become a rolling stone. He gathers absolutely no more. Somebody should advise him to go back to the office of president, to sit down, to listen, to read, to think, and to govern.
What do you think is the reason behind this coming together? The real reason behind this coming together, not what, would be met at face value, based on the things that you've just said.
At the very bottom of this whole thing is something that we should recognize as avarice. Some insatiable appetite for the fat of the land. We cannot call it power, because power is a means to an end. And that end is the national resource. Indeed, it's interesting that item 1 of the memorandum of agreement that these people have talks about inclusivity. They do not tell us exactly inclusivity in what, although they attempt to, in a way, break it down, but they say it's a distribution of national resources and opportunities, but distribution to who? We've heard here this morning about Gabon, which became extremely wealthy, the Kuwait of Africa. But it became extremely wealthy where the wealth was flowing into just a few pockets. And so when persons such as this come together, it's about the opportunities that are in the country. We have heard about the NADCO report, which is supposed to be enacted, and Parliament has been cautioned. It's been told that not even a comma should be changed, in spite of the fact that it's supposed to be a forum of serious thinkers who should reflect on issues before legislating them into law. It's probably, no, not probably, it's certainly expected to expand the executive, as we saw the report itself when it came out about 2 years ago. It is supposed to create offices for people, office of prime minister, office of leader of opposition, and sundry deputies. And it's all about exposing them to opportunities. And in Africa, it's opportunities to plunder, it's opportunities to splurge, and it's opportunities for self-enrichment at the expense of the nation. Unfortunately, the nation tends to be gullible, to be very easily inveigled. I have seen people clapping. This clapping, clapping for claptrap, I cannot understand for the love of me what kind of people we are. That we are caught up in this Stockholm syndrome, that when the oppressors come before us and when they put us in chains, we mistake those chains for jewelry. I cannot understand this.
Now, Barack, as we talk about this report, pretty much the agreement that was signed Friday, it has 10 items. But let's go to NADCO report and how NADCO report came into being. This was immediately after the Unga revolution. Then the NADCO report that included members of the opposition and the government who sat together and came up with this report and how it was going to be implemented. Yet again, we come to this memorandum of understanding that comes with the 10 items, and top of that is implementation of the NADCO report, inclusivity of budgetary allocations. everything, as well said, have been put inside the constitution. So what exactly is this report, this memorandum of understanding seeking to achieve?
NADCO is a Trojan horse. That within that Trojan horse, you will put in sweeteners for members of parliament, for example, so that where they are not feeling intimidated, they are feeling induced. Within NADCO, there's something about the National Government Constituency Development Fund, which is supposed to be some kind of engine oil that is going to lubricate the desire of members of parliament to see NADCO going through quickly. That there is the real active ingredient where the focus is the expansion of the executive, the creation of the office of Prime Minister, the creation of 2 deputies for Prime Minister, the creation of offices of 2 deputy presidents, and such other considerations that do not take into account even the resource base. And one may very well want to ask, this time, last month, all eyes and all focus was on Addis Ababa.
Yes.
Mr. Odinga was supposed to become the chairperson of the African Union Commission. And nobody was talking about any crisis in the country. Nobody was talking about the need to get into some kind of memorandum that would put some people in a tango, and that this tango would make the country a better place to live in, a better place to belong to as a citizen, as a visitor, whatever the case. Supposing and just supposing that Mr. Odinga had become the chairperson of the African Union Commission, would he be back in the country signing memoranda with Mr. Ruto, Dr. Ruto, and signing off as the leader of the Orange Democratic Movement? In fact, you will help me, ladies and gentlemen, to remember, because maybe memory fails me. But when Mr. Odinga was preparing to go to Addis Ababa, the Orange Democratic Movement, through its relevant organs, assembled together, and they made certain resolutions. The National Executive Congress of the party was reconstituted. My teacher of political science at the University of Nairobi, Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, became the acting party leader
Of ODM.
I do not know whether my memory fails me, but I remember Mr. Odinga saying that he had now left that space of political activities in the country, and he was going to serve the continent. When you come back from a mission such as that one, and even if you still have the appetite and the energy, the zeal, the gravitas to enable you to carry on with the activities of that office, one would expect that you would engage into reversal of the processes that made you disengage, that again the organs would reassemble, and it would be announced once again that you have taken over as a party leader. But we saw Mr. Odinga flying straight into President William Ruto's waiting open arms in Mombasa, where they embraced and had tea. Of course, the real victuals and viands, the foods, were in the adjacent room. The one where they sat, there was only water to deceive the world that they are very conscious about the need not to be splurging our resources. But there he goes, they meet there, and they agree, and Paul Mwangi, the lawyer, is already there, and the documents are on the table already, and they are signed by the two-party leaders. Things are not done like that. City Muga, in the Luo world where we come from, when you return home from war, you take a bath, at home. In fact, you don't go to another person's home. It is not allowed. Even when you come from a funeral, you are not supposed to go to another person's home. You go to your home, you bathe, you are cleansed, and Mr. Odinga should have gone back home to reflect a bit, to be even given something which is called in the Luo manyasi. And finish 3 days at home, reflecting, getting cleansed, then come out again. Come out tentatively. Don't just come out with gusto, as if nothing is happening. And this is what I mean when I talk about the spirit called Nyawawa, which is a very restless spirit. It's called the spirit of the lake. And when it possesses you, Lord God have mercy.
You know, if someone says that we are in an interesting political season, they would be right, because on the one hand we see things that we've seen before. Some players are consistent in this because they're the same players who've been in similar seasons before. But this season is unique in the sense that there is a third player. They're called the Gen Zs.
Yes.
The Gen Zs are not just a group. They represent the awakening of a spirit that had long died or had thought to have been dead in the people. The spirit that says, enough is enough, and we actually do want real change, not talk. Okay? And this is what we mean by it. We start with this finance bill and we're saying this thing isn't working for us. So now, we are in an interesting season. But again, interesting in that we get to learn how people who've been in politics for a long time think. And that when problems are presented and they are national problems, we see with great clarity how they think those problems should be solved politically. Now, the question that comes to my mind is, we've had similar discussions before, we've had declarations made similar to this before, and ostensibly these were pronouncements that were meant to bring about the change that was desired. Not change for its sake, but change that had been expressed was desirable by the citizenry. So now, if we start, say the NADCO report that has been mentioned, did it go to Parliament?
Yes, it did.
Yes, it did.
And what did Parliament do?
The committee, JLAC, rejected it. But now we are being told that it was not tabled on the floor, and that it's now going to be presented before the committee of the whole, which really means the whole house, and that JLAC can be overruled.
You see,
what has changed?
The point is, it also opens our eyes to what the political will attempt to do, even when it is that they are the ones who have begun a process, and then the process, by its very nature, has to go through constitutional processes.
Yes.
Okay, we're talking about the article here is Article 256. Now, it is an opportunity to learn and to understand the leadership of the political class who represent the political thinking of the country. Okay? And the question that I asked, I will ask again. How on earth do these things actually address the problems that have been mentioned? Because it is supposed that these 10 points we talk about in the MOU are supposed to address these problems. We've understood that.
How? Let me just connect to that, and maybe we can just do an answer before we go to the break, Barack, because the assumption is that there is a crisis. That some of these things that we see for which there were solutions given is that there was a crisis in the country. But if we were to speculate and say, what if Raila Odinga then actually did win the AUC chair seat, who would have handled the crisis? Would we see Anyang' Nyong'o, for example, then joining hands with William Ruto and saying, let us now give solutions to these problems that we see? Would we see a similar thing? If there was conflict so strong, so things happening so terribly that needed 10 points of an agenda to bring people together to fix them, would we see the acting chairperson of ODM in the person of Anyang' Nyong'o coming together with President William Ruto to have this 10-point agenda that would solve these problems? And then you say, okay, so we've done it. How would it be fixed?
As has been correctly observed, we have been through these cycles before. It's also been correctly observed that when we look at that which we would call the national challenge, what Tom Mboya called some many years ago challenge of nationhood, these things have been addressed and they have been covered comprehensively in the instruments that govern us in the country. The thing that we have not done is to create an office for Mr. Odinga, because Mr. Odinga must be in government. Since 1997, he must always somehow find his way into government. And this whole effort is about finding a space for him in government. I don't agree at all that we have or we had a crisis. Let me use the correct tense. We now have a crisis, and that crisis is Raila and Ruto. They are a crisis.
How?
They are a crisis in the sense that we must carry them on our shoulders, willy-nilly. We must bear the burden. And you have seen Dr. Ruto's motorcade. You've never seen anything so humongous than that. And we have to do another one for Mr. Odinga. You recall when he became Prime Minister, and in fact, just before he became Prime Minister, he went to Kisumu, and the people of Kisumu were feeling unhappy. They were feeling cheated because they expected him to be president and they expected him to hold out to the end. And he was telling them, nyinyi hamuoni ile hizo 99 ziko hapo zote, mnasema sijapewa madaraka. Hizo 99. 99 is the old name for those for the Gen Zs. They do not know 99. The police vehicles used to be called 99.
Okay.
In the old days.
999.
Oh, right. It was the number you called. Okay, fine. Okay.
And at that particular occasion, when he said that, the response was not positive.
No, it wasn't.
In fact, it was extremely negative.
So the crisis first defined itself as President William Ruto, whom we have regretted in the past that we made president because he's completely clueless. His philosophy of government is about enriching himself. His philosophy of government is about making declarations and edicts by virtue of occupying office without even recognizing that declarations that he needs to make are governed by law, and that they should cite specific articles, items of law. For example, he cannot just stand up one day and say, I'm commander-in-chief, and since I'm commander-in-chief, I'm saying now you can build up to 36 floors next to the military airbase. Or because I'm commander-in-chief, I'm now telling the military to cede that property, that land there, to a church somewhere or to barrack. He needs to go back to the statutes and say that according or in accordance with article number this and that of the military, the Defense Forces Act, powers conferred upon me by this instrument, I, William Samoei Ruto, do grant the following, do declare the following.
Such powers actually
And
even exist.
if they existed, but you see, they do not
They
exist.
don't exist. They
So
don't exist,
we are
yeah.
in the space of arbitrary rule, arbitrary governance, and that is the crisis, and it's not going to be solved by a memorandum,
between two individuals.
a chimeric memorandum of understanding between two individuals. Maybe the Gen Zs, and Gen Z must now be expanded to reflect not just
A certain age bracket.
certain age bracket, but a certain mindset and a
absolutely.
certain spirit.
Let's take a break on this point. At this point, Dr. Barack Maluka is here with us, and we're just trying to, pick apart, some of the re-alliances that we are seeing in the country and what they're actually really for, as opposed to what we are being told they're for. It's 23 minutes to 8 o'clock. We'll come back after this break and continue with that conversation. Kenya's biggest conversation. Don't go away.
I'm really sorry.
Clock, and Dr. Barack Maluka is our guest this hour in the hot seat, and we're looking at some of these conflict issues supposedly that are being sorted out by the memorandum of understanding that has come into play. Or is it two individuals who are making sure that expediency is delivered for 2027?
And when you talk about the conflict ostensibly that is here, let's just go back to this report. Now, we go to the report says in article point number 9, stopping wastage of public resources. But let's escalate that to what NADCO report as well said on the same point number 4, reduction of government expenditures. Both reports speaking about the same thing. But even before we got into these memorandum of understanding, the government spent 534 million shillings on Raila Odinga's campaign. Here they're talking about wastage of public resources. Aren't they residents of doublespeak?
We do not know what vote those monies came from. We are in a country where there's no disclosure. Government pronouncements about expenditure are always about firefighting. You will hear, for example, that Bomas of Kenya has been sold to someone from Turkey. Then you will suddenly get somebody from a high place in government saying, no, it has not been sold. It's just being
Renovated.
shut down for renovation. You do not know who is renovating. You do not know how they have got that contract to renovate. You don't know how much money is involved. And you do not know whether any invitations to tender to renovate were done. Such is where we are. But you also see a president who is a Vasco da Gama of sorts, all the time on one voyage or the other. And any time the president travels within the country, the office of the president, according to reliable sources, and you can look at the various accounts and so on, the office alone internally spends upwards of 100 million Kenya shillings
To do what?
to travel on one day.
Yeah.
When you hear that His Excellency the President is doing a tour of the coast, one day alone is 100 million.
The
Kenya.
coast in Kenya
Yes,
or another coast?
Costing.
in Kenya.
Dr. Maluka, that is a lot of money. That's 100 million shillings that we're talking about here. And just the other day, I mean, let's do some comparisons, shall we? Just the other day, we talked about 140 million shillings and what it can actually do in different sectors around the country. But we're saying that the president leaves State House in Nairobi and makes his way to the coast to Mombasa. Makes his way to the coast, not necessarily Mombasa, it could be anywhere. Kwale, he went the other day, been to Kilifi and did the rounds.
5 days.
5 days.
Yes.
Are we saying that in 5 days?
Minimum.
Or are we saying that in 1 day, 100 million shillings?
Of 500 million shillings, office of the president alone. Okay. We have not talked about the auxiliaries that are following him all over the place, because they must be seen to be there. They are the state officers, they are the public officers who are there, how much they are costing us. And of course, external travel is a lot more. It's probably in the range of about 250 million per day.
So let's lift the lid. Let's lift the lid on some of these things, because I think it's necessary for us to do that. When we look at these 10 points, and I would really hate to be in to see the position that this puts Kenyans in, and I'm talking about the 55 million Kenyans, because this number of individuals that we're speaking about who are in KICC are not more than 2,000 people. They're in the glaring minority, right, who came together on this. But the 50 million Kenyans who are looking for daily bread, who are looking for daily healthcare, who are looking for daily education, transport, whatever, my question continues to be where they lie when these memoranda of understanding come together. So if we're saying, for example, that you spend this kind of money, and one of your big agenda items on this coming together is to curtail government spending, is to make sure that you don't spend so much, or that we make sure that devolution is working, or we make sure that the counties are kept or checked in terms of their excesses. What are we talking about?
A mere formation of words whose significance vaporizes as soon as they leave the mouth, or as soon as the ink dries on the paper. Just now, this forest that His Excellency the President is doing in Nairobi, what is the premium? What is the value proposition for the people of Nairobi? If government is working, the work is seen in the results. President Mwai Kibaki was there in State House. The first 5 years he was busy working, he was building roads, and he did not need to travel around the country, to cut across the country, for Kenyans to appreciate that there was work going on. If we looked at even the very much maligned Uhuru Kenyatta presidency, the first term we saw the railway, the SGR, it's out here for everyone to see. We saw roads being done in other parts of the country. We saw in the second term this expressway around here. What is President William Ruto doing? This money that they are splurging around with the Sakaja, look at the roads in Nairobi. Look at this Mombasa Road. Just travel this road from here to Westlands and see what it is like. Look at the other, look at Riverside Drive. Look at the roads in Lavington, in Muthaiga. Look at the roads in Eastlands. What are they doing? We are here in a country where people are going to hospital, they cannot get treatment because the system that disrupted NHIF is not working. Instead of the president fixing it, he's running across the country telling us how the dead horse is alive and well and kicking. This is the contradiction, the distance between what is said and the reality. If there are people around His Excellency the President and who really think they like him and value him and they wish him a second term, they should tell him to stop these meaningless forays across the country, to go back to State House or even to Arambe House and sit down and work for the country, and to stop wasting public funds on early campaigns, because what he's doing is an early campaign for 2027 and he's spending public funds on those early campaigns and is now paired up with Mr. Odinga in that direction. And at the same time, they are introducing a very dangerous agenda of 41 against 1, which we saw before. Somebody somewhere whom they listen to must tell them that this is not the way to take the country.
Barack, I hear you say that these leaders have pretty much come together for what is in it for them. In these conversations, it's not about Kenyan. It's not center to these conversations and engagements, because Kenyans, as they speak in terms of President, stop spending 140 million shillings in a church and taking government property. They are tear gas and they are beaten to a pulp. In these conversations, talk about NADCO report, talk about the MOU and all the other handshakes that are there. Do they sit down to ask, what does the Mwananchi want?
No, they don't, and which I find very strange, because President Ruto told us repeatedly, and he has dropped that line now, that there were no more fools left in Kenya. He said that time and again, that there were no more fools left in Kenya. And he ought to understand that there are no more fools left in Kenya. He cannot inveigle us. He cannot deceive us. These optics of running around. And I think that the country is running on a very low level intelligence. Intelligence both in terms of what the president and Mr. Odinga receive as information on the public mood, and intelligence at the level of the capacity to think among those who advise them. They say that you show me your company and I'll tell you who you are. And we just need to look at the fellows around His Excellency, the President. And once in a while, some of them are even foolhardy enough to go and stand in a public place before cameras and purport to be addressing us, to be addressing the country.
That's a tyranny of habit. They are accustomed to doing it, and they have had no reason to change what they do. Perhaps they'll have reason, but I am particularly happy about the MOU. Particularly. Because the MOU follows in a well-documented train and chain of similar documents that we've had in the past. Documents that we've spoken of but never really examined in great detail. This now comes at a time when the country is in the mood to examine things in great detail. Because one of the things that the MOU talked about was ensuring that we respect the right of peaceful assembly. We haven't even taken a breath. It's been abused.
Yes.
We haven't even done anything. So we'll itemize the things that are in the MOU, ostensibly things which must change. We didn't ask them to present the MOU. No, we didn't. We didn't ask them to have an MOU. They have an MOU. They have gone and documented and said, these are things we wish to achieve. We will want to know timelines for each. Oh, yes. We will want to know how each will be achieved. Again, with timelines.
Everything has an expiry date.
Yes, it has. By a certain time, if you haven't done it, then yes. We will want to know what processes all these things must follow as laid down in the Constitution and laid down by our laws. And we'll want to know what the outcomes will be for people who do not adhere to the letter of the Constitution. This is one of the best things that has happened to me in a very, very long time. Because in an attempt to bring peace, and I must say, I cannot downplay what the handshakes do. I cannot.
For individuals.
No.
Not for the country.
For the individuals, it's obvious. It's for the country. And I'm going to say this.
How does that help?
You see, there is a nefarious understanding of what the individuals purport to do.
Yes.
But we have set a trend in this country that when there is a problem, people talk. Now, what we are against is the outcomes of those talk. We don't see them benefiting us. That we talk is a good thing. That we even discuss, that we even come to an agreement It's a good precedence. But what is unpalatable is that these things don't seem to help the Mwananchi. And yet they are presented as the panacea, as the one thing that the Mwananchi will benefit immensely from. So this MOU will undergo scrutiny, it will undergo commentary, it will undergo dissection, and the people who penned their names are going to be held to account, because it is them who penned their names. So when we ask directly, it should not be seen as disrespect for power. No, you said.
The power must be interrogated.
Yes, you said. It's in the public domain. So since in the public domain, we are the public, and we in that domain are asking, thank you, when?
But
How?
Does it seems as though that there are a number of people in a space who may or may not have had an issue, and then out of this million people, 2 individuals, self-appointed and making decisions on their own, decided to take up a position for the whole of Kenya. Was this a correct spot or correct position to take and say, well, we have the answer, and us coming together is going to ensure that this answer or this solution is delivered? It seems a bit patronizing to me, but I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Is there anything here that is contrary to the Constitution?
So why not
We
just follow the
say-
Constitution then?
I don't know.
We say that
Is there anything that is contrary to the Constitution?
No, there isn't.
No.
at the start we said that we were looking for dung where there was no cow.
Browsing.
We are looking for solutions where there were no challenges. Because these things that we have itemized, or they have itemized, are things that are covered in articles of the law as we have them. The only thing which is not there is that provision in NADCO of creation of offices that some people are supposed to occupy, and that is the bottom line. In terms of what CT asks about timelines, CT ought to know, and he knows, I know that he knows, that in this country we talk about things like when funds will be available. We are going to build this road from Modogashe to I don't know where to where to where to where when funds are available. And beyond that, the only footnote we would add would be that in the Ruto, the William Ruto context, time and timelines are fluid, deadlines are fluid. When you say 2 years, 2 years could mean anything. In fact, we need to start asking them to define the basis. When they say 2, is it in base 2? Is it in base?
But
in base?
that an opportunity for a dialogue about the Constitution. Wouldn't you say a dialogue of the Constitution and its applicability to our daily lives has been presented to us? That's what I was asking you.
No, the
question
Constitution
you ask is a valid one, but have we not been handed, just given, and so guys, we haven't been discussing this constitutional matter properly. We've just rephrased it, but it's a constitution. Now let's get down and...
Or somebody could or somebody could also argue, CT, and that's what I wanted to ask, that essentially you're just taking something that you should have been doing all this time. You've not been doing it, but you want to dress it up like something else so that people can see this new glass shiny toy and think that it's some new thing you've come up with. But it is not. It is written in the Constitution that you have a duty to ensure is implemented and practiced.
When you politicize these matters, you know what you've just done? Even people who weren't aware of these tenets in the Constitution will now be aware, because it's a discussion that they weren't having before. The politicization of it and the angst and the emotions that are attached to these matters will now bring about a discussion that hitherto has not been had with regards to these salient things on the Constitution.
The audit is not the audit. The audit that we need is not the audit of the Constitution. It's the audit of our fidelity to the Constitution.
How
That
do you-
is the audit,
how do you
because
acquire fidelity when you don't even know what the Constitution says?
we know what the Constitution says.
No.
The ordinary
The
fellow
Mwananchi
in
does
the-
not
The,
know
the,
what the
Mwana- the
Constitution says.
Mwananchi knows what the Constitution says.
No, they do
That
not.
is why the Gen Z will go out to protest and to take over the House of Parliament, because they understand. That is why we saw these young people occupying
Barack.
some shrine the other day.
But understanding
The
means
problem-
internalizing. When you internalize it, you act upon it.
That's
If
what we have done.
haven't internalized the concept of our sovereignty, have we?
We have.
We have not.
We have.
How-
That is why we are speaking the truth to power. We have. That is why we are here this morning, telling President Ruto and other people, the question is our faithfulness to the Constitution.
we are talking heads.
Because if we talk about the Constitution, we are saying that let us see where the Constitution is not working well, so that we can adjust it, so that we can create a few more new chambers
Yes.
for some people. No, the question is, are we faithful? To the law.
And on that note, it's 8 a.m. And it's necessary to bring some of these things out. I think we can hide it under the cover of documentation and MOUs and individuals, but at the end of the day, the question remains that what does it do for the people of Kenya? Has to be front and center every time, in my opinion. Dr. Barack Maluka, always a pleasure. Thank you for being here.